Every Christmas season, my brother and I would lock ourselves inside our home. Until every single decoration was put down, we would not leave the house. If ever my brother would see a single thing that would remind him of this particular holiday, he would piss himself in fear while bawling his eyes out until he runs out of gas. Just the combined colors of red and green would remind him of a traumatic memory that happened 5 years ago on Christmas Eve. Our parents' house was very far from town, and we had to stay with my father's colleague in order to attend school. It would take at least 2 hours on a sled just to get to the passable path that would lead to our house, and then we had to cross the forest on foot for another hour or so. Heading home becomes especially hard on Christmas season when everything is covered with a thick layer of snow. The trail would be completely buried. Any person who was unfamiliar with the landscape would freeze to death before he could even find the path. We were only able to see our parents during weekends, and this setup made every holiday we spent together even more special. Amongst all of them, the main highlight each year was the Christmas Eve. We rarely had any visitor come by because of our home's location. In order to make the occasion feel more special and fun, even if there were only 4 of us in a small house surrounded by mounds of snow, our parents would think of activities that we would do with the gifts as our rewards. They would make some games where we do a bit of detective work to put the pieces together, and then it would reveal the location where the gifts were hidden. My brother and I always looked forward to it. While we were staying at the town, they would have more than enough time to prepare the games and surprises. And for my brother's 6th Christmas Eve, the surprises were horrifyingly shocking that his sanity was shattered for years. Nobody was there when we arrived home, but there were notes all over the house which gave us clues. There were leather gloves in front of the doorway for my little brother, while I received a leather arm warmer instead. They both had a strong smell of vinegar, varnish, and glue, and they looked somewhat hideous as well. The stitches were loose, and the finishing was a bit sticky. It was obvious that they were handmade, and so I deeply appreciated the effort and the time they gave to make them. Despite of their unpleasant smell, we wore them anyway. Along with the gloves and the arm warmer was a small note saying, "Come find us." In a short glance, the first thing we noticed was the wooden jewelry box in front of the Christmas tree. There was a lock, and I figured that the goal was to search for the key. It was the first time that none of our parents were around to host the activities they made for us. I thought that they might be trying something new this time around, and so we went along with it. There was a platter of steamed ham on the table while the rest of the food was covered. There was also a note besides it which said that we should finish the activities first before we could see the rest. I bit a mouthful of the slice before we proceeded. It was rather tough to chew, and the meat was aggressively sweetened by caramel. Mother's ham was often cooked and seasoned differently, but I didn't think much about it. There was also a soup being boiled at the pot. The smell of spices and herbs were quite strong, and I didn't bother to get close enough to see the contents of the soup since it was stinging my nose. Because of the boiling pot, I figured that they were just hiding nearby. As I looked around to search for more clues, I noticed the Christmas socks pinned on the wall had something quite hefty inside them. Even the Christmas gloves also looked like they were stuffed. I was about to check them out when I noticed something else on the kitchen. There were some boot prints on the floor that I didn't recognize. I was very familiar with Father's shoe prints since Mother often scolded him for dirtying the floor. However, the ones that I saw weren't his. There was someone else around, and this person was peeking through the window of the back door. There was a big man in a red suit with a fake beard standing right in front of the back door. After knocking twice, he came walking in. My little brother was very delighted after seeing our visitor. He ran towards him with his arms wide open. There were times when Father dressed up as Santa Claus. Father was slender and had to stuff the suit with pillows to look the part, but this man was tall and thick enough to fill up the costume. He imitated Santa's laugh, and my brother cheered for him. I didn't recognize him until his sleeves rolled up and I saw the tattoo on his forearm. It was Uncle Reeve, a hunter who lived in a cabin a couple of miles away from our house. Uncle Reeve was very close with my brother. He often played around with him whenever we saw him around town. However, he was the last person that I would expect to show up in our house during the holiday. Back when I was younger, Uncle Reeve had an affair with my mother. There was even a rumor that my brother was actually his son, but our parents never talked about it when we were around. He was not on good terms with my family for obvious reasons, but since we were only at home 2 days a week, we didn't really know what was going on whenever we were not around. It seemed that my brother immediately recognized him as well. I asked him where our parents were, and he told me that they were hiding around the house. He grabbed my brother's hand, and he led us outside. My little brother got really excited when he saw a big snowman built inside our yard. Beside it were a few metal spikes stuck on the snow along with a note with written instructions, and so I realized that it was a part of the game. There were 3 spikes on the snow, and 2 of them had painted eyeballs at the tip, while the other one had a wooden heart painted with the same finish as my brother's gloves. In the instruction, we were told to complete the snowman by giving him his eyes and heart. Uncle Reeves said that both of us needed to pierce the spikes to the snowman at the same time in order to succeed. Without any questions, we played along with it. Since my brother couldn't reach the head, I handled the spikes for the eyes while he took care of the heart. We simultaneously pierced the snowman, which was tougher than I expected. My brother couldn't even push the spike all the way in, so Uncle Reeves gave him a hand. When we were done with it, Uncle Reeves reached inside his pocket and handed me the key for the jewelry box. I thought that the activity was far too easy this time around. My brother and I walked back to the house while Uncle Reeves remained standing beside the snowman. We crouched in front of the Christmas tree while opening the box. My brother did not recognize what was inside it at first, but my hands began shaking while goosebumps crawled all over my skin. The content of the box was an actual heart. Written behind the lid was, "I am giving you my heart." I wanted to puke, but I held it in so my brother wouldn't be terrified. I assumed that this was Uncle Reeves' idea of a sick joke, but I still couldn't figure out where our parents were. I looked around and saw the stuffed Christmas socks and gloves on the wall once again, and so I decided to check it out. When I finally saw what was inside them, I threw them away immediately after grabbing the notes that came with them. Inside the gloves and socks were amputated hands and feet. The skin of the hands were even removed, and I realized why when I read the note. It said, "I will always hold your hand." It took me a second to process what it meant since it was too sickening to believe. I looked at my brother and I told him to remove the gloves immediately. The skin from the amputated hands were used to create the pair of gloves that my brother wore all this time. The armband was also made of human skin, but didn't know which part it came from and whom it belonged to. I looked around and remembered the slice of ham on the table. I removed the cover from the rest of the dishes, and I confirmed that my suspicion was correct. The dishes on the table were all made of actual human flesh, and the ham that I ate was a human leg. The arm warmer that I was wearing all this time was the skin that came from it. Intuitively, I got curious about what was inside the boiling pot. I was already shuddering in fear and disgust while my little brother was completely frozen while staring at the amputated hands on the floor. I took a ladle from the kitchen, reached inside the pot. It contained something big and heavy. Before I even saw it completely, I already started puking when the hair strands floated to the surface. I bawled and screamed when I realized that inside the bowl was Mother's head. The rest of the meat and the limbs were hers as well, but I still didn't know where Father was until I looked out the window of the back door. I saw the snowman slowly melting with blood. Father was tied inside it, and we just pierced his heart and his eyes with our own hands. Uncle Reeves was a psychopath, and he murdered our parents.